My buddy Peter King back here on the show. How are you, Peter?
Hey, Rich, you know what is absolutely amazing? I just listened to your rundown, and obviously there's so much going on. But that game last night was one of the most incredible football games for the last minute of play that I've ever seen, because there are so many things that are left to discuss and try to figure out. I was blown away by it, not the least of which was Marshawn Lynch, after 5 years, jogging onto the field with seconds to go for what we thought was going to be a 1-yard plunge and the biggest, one of the biggest runs of his life after coming off the couch. I mean, there are just so many weird things about it, and yet it's almost like we've forgotten about that, and nobody cares about that because everybody wants to know who's the next coach of Team X, Y, and Z.
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, that possible run by Lynch from the 1-yard line never happened because there was a delay of game penalty, after which a throw into the end zone led to a non-pass interference call, and then no buzz in from New York City. And as I started the show, Peter, as I started the show, it's the fact that there was no even stop to review. This is exactly the situation in which the Saints didn't get the call last year, leading to the review process to be changed for this very moment. And not even a buzz in just to say, yeah, we didn't see enough in the quick spot because we don't want to mess with the flow of the game. I'm just wondering again, what Al Riveron's job status do you think, how things stand with that going into, we're all talking about coaching status. What do you think his role moving forward with the NFL is going to be, Peter?
I mean, he could very well be the fall guy for the debacle that has been the pass interference review rules change. I mean, Rich, somehow, some way, in late March in Phoenix, Arizona, we all sat there and we all heard why exactly the rule was being changed to allow, to allow the review of both pass interference calls on the field and then what wasn't called on the field. And then once the season started, we learned that even though that rule was on the books, they weren't going to use it. Basically, and look, we've talked about that forever. What bothers me is that was the exact situation last night that was supposed to be fixed by it. And for Al Riveron to come out and say nothing to see here in his pool report statement after the game, I thought was somewhere between stunning and irresponsible. But again, that's like one of 5 things that happened in the last half minute of the game that just absolutely shocked me. One of which was, Rich, one of the reasons why, they get the delay of game call, and Marshawn Lynch comes jogging onto the field. They get the delay of game call. But you have to ask yourself, if you're in the 1-yard line and you have no timeouts left and there's 22 seconds to go, the question is, are you going to give it to Marshawn Lynch for a plunge to try to make it? And if he doesn't make it, what do you do? Spike the ball, and then you're on 4th down with 10 seconds to go? I think it was exceedingly poorly planned by Pete Carroll, Brian Schottenheimer, and the Seattle Seahawks.
And then again, it just reconfigured the seedings that last minute of play where
it's
everything.
Gigantic.
I know.
Also, it's the difference, Rich, between playing 2 home games to get to the Super Bowl versus playing 3 road games to get to the Super Bowl. That is what that single 30-second sequence meant to the San Francisco 49ers. It's just one of the biggest biggest series of plays in recent NFL history.
Yeah, and again, what it also meant, too, is that Green Bay would have to get on a plane to Santa Clara again, if all the seedings play out, to get to the Super Bowl. And we all know what happened when Green Bay last visited there. It was a total washout on NBC. San Francisco dominated.
Isn't Green Bay to you one of the real mystery teams? I mean,
although it is in one way, Peter, that it's a mystery to me why we're not talking about them, right? And in the same way that again, the reason is that you got Matt LaFleur not getting credit for what he's done because Aaron Rodgers is a GOAT, and all you got to do is just roll the footballs out for him, and yet. Aaron Rodgers is supposedly not elite anymore because of the way that he's playing, and then the two things can't be squared in the same circle, and yet they have 13 wins, Peter.
It's such a weird. The whole thing is so strange, Rich, when you think about it, because if you look at his numbers last year, when supposedly he hit rock bottom under Mike McCarthy, versus this year, significantly more yards per game thrown for. A better rating, all that stuff. It's so weird, and it just goes to show you that Aaron Rodgers is a fantastic centerpiece. But when he has a running game, the type that he had this year, and when you have the Smith brothers, Darius and Preston, to really solidify your defense, then Aaron Rodgers doesn't have to win all these games by himself.
And Aaron Jones is the reason why, too, and he gets snubbed for the Pro Bowl, and he is just dynamic. He is excellent, and I've had him on the show a couple times, just a good kid for whom good things are properly happening. And yet again, we're not talking about them. Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show, and just to, I guess, put a button on all of this, that the San Francisco win aided, in fact, by a non-pass interference call that is not reviewed, even though the review process is open exactly to review stuff like that. The team that has to now play one home game and then potentially go on the road twice at Green Bay, at San Francisco to get to the Super Bowl is the Saints. It's really amazing how the Saints kind of wound up on a short end of a stick. They didn't get the same break.
I mean, they're the best team in the NFC right now from what I've seen the last 3 or 4 weeks.
I'd agree.
And look at Drew Brees. There was a while right when he came back from his thumb injury that everybody said, well, now we're seeing the decline of Drew Brees. He was a good quarterback, but he wasn't a great one. And in the last 6 or 7 weeks, he's as good as ever. And, Rich, you started off talking about Phillip Rivers, and that is an incredible story in and of itself. That could fill 4 Rich Eisen shows just in and of itself, and you'll probably spend 10 minutes on it today. But just imagine all of the tentacles to Phillip Rivers. What happens if Dean Spanos and Tom Telesco think, well, geez, we really need a billboard player. We need a superstar player to help us sell all these boxes and luxury seating and PSLs and all that. So, hey, Drew Brees and Tom Brady are both free agents, in March. So why don't we go after them? That's why there are so many things to talk about today that have nothing to do with coaching. And yet, just before we got on the phone, I was looking at Twitter, and that's all anybody's talking about. Nobody's talking about the fate of these teams. So just it's an interesting time in the NFL.
Especially since Cam Newton could be free, too, at some point, and what that means for so many other teams. Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show. You mentioned Breeze, and before we do get to the coaching carousel, you were part of the NFL 100 all-time team Blue Ribbon panel, and the quarterback reveal show that just finished up the NFL 100 all-time team show, 6-part series on Friday night. I knew 6 months ago that Drew Brees didn't make it, and that would be a big stink once this was revealed. And this was before he became the all-time leader in passing touchdowns and passing yards. Did you vote for him? I mean, walk me through. Again, I don't mean to put you on the spot. You're also a Hall of Fame selector. This is just a par for your course in being asked this type of question.
Here's the issue that I saw. And, Rich, look, I have tremendous respect for pro football history. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, what this came down to is the fact that basically we were voting on a 98-year team in many ways because we voted in June 2018. The problem with voting in June 2018 as the 2 most efficient, accurate seasons in Drew Brees' life did not count. And I'm not saying I'm convinced, but I think it's pretty likely that if the vote were held right now, that Drew Brees would have made it likely, I would think, instead of Roger Staubach. Nothing against Roger Staubach, but I think, I think you have to recognize that the time that we voted was that you can't put 8 quarterbacks from the modern era, on this. And so, therefore, I believe that if the vote were today, there would be at least one change, and that's Brees in. And I'm not positive who would have been out. Maybe, unfortunately, it would have been Otto Graham or
Sammy Baugh.
Or Sammy Baugh. I don't know. But all I know is that any team without Otto Graham and Sammy Baugh on it, I'd be apoplectic right now. It would be totally ridiculous. We're not voting. All these people, I got so many emails to my column saying it's incredible you didn't vote for this guy, that guy, or the other guy. Who are all these guys from the 20s and 30s and 40s and all that? And I just said, look, you can't not have a guy who played 10 years at quarterback of professional football, and he made the championship game every year, and he won 7 of them. You can't do that. So there were going to be people who fell by the wayside, and unfortunately, in this particular case, I think timing really cost Brees.
Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show. In the few minutes I have with you left, let's talk coaching carousel. Why did Freddie Kitchens get one and done in Cleveland, Peter?
I mean, he couldn't get a hold of his team. You have Baker Mayfield falling off a cliff. You have internal people saying he was not organized. He didn't know, he didn't know really how to plan, how to coach his team. It was never hard enough on Odell Beckham. Should have told Odell Beckham a long time ago, look, you want to be a great player? Stop being in Paris or wherever you are in April, May, and June. You got to come to these practices. I mean, he wasn't big enough for the chair, unfortunately, and I really like him. I think he was terrific last year. Unfortunately, he just didn't bring that to the chair this time.
So, with the expected departure of Jason Garrett, is there any other surprises that might come? Do you think, coaching?
I doubt it. The other two that could the Lions change their mind after Matt Patricia loses his last 9, goes 6-25-1 since midseason last year. Matt Patricia is the luckiest man out of everyone this morning because, look, he's supposed to build a defense. That defense in the last 26 games has allowed 24 points a game. And you get your quarterback hurt. Wow. Everybody gets their quarterback hurt. So again, he's lucky. And I think he's staying. The owner says he's staying. And we got to take their word for it. And the other one I think is Anthony Lynn. I think it would be a major injustice. And I don't think he's going to get fired, but I got an eyebrow raised over that one. They didn't win the close games this year, obviously. But, he was so good in his first 2 years. That team was so good. I think so much of this year was about the decline of Phillip Rivers. And can they fix him? Will they want to have him back? That is stuff, as Rivers said yesterday, to decide in the next 3 months.
And how real is Urban Meyer coming to the pros this year, do you think, Peter?
I mean, I don't know, Rich. I don't know. And I would be, if I were a team, and it isn't that I don't think Urban Meyer's a great coach, and if his heart was absolutely into it, I'd say great. But, I mean, he doesn't stay places long. It's like, it reminds me a little bit of Nick Saban in Miami. The second year, I'm not all in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the problem with Urban Meyer is that he's used to winning 9 out of every 10 games. If he goes to Cleveland right now, how will he feel about winning 6 out of 10 or 5 out of 10? And maybe he could totally turn it around. But I would be very, very, I'd enter that one with 3 eyes open because I don't want a guy after 2 or 3 years who's going to say, I couldn't make the impact I wanted, I'm out.
So who is the Dallas favorite then?
I think they're going to go for a real shiny object. I wrote today that I think hiring Jason Witten would be an extremely dumb thing. And I love Jason Witten. Everybody does. But how do you put in that absolute circus, how do you put a guy who's used to the circus but who's never run a staff meeting in his life? I just think that would be a huge error. And I don't even know if there's legs to that story or if it's something that's just a little bit silly. I guess the other one that I would say is if I were Jerry Jones, I would interview Mike McCarthy for 8 hours this week. I mean, look, 2 weeks ago, I spent, a day and a half with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. And, Rich, here's a guy who realizes this is a guy who's going to have like a 14-person analytics/video department. He knows that the world is changing in the NFL, and he wants to change along with it. Not entirely, but he understands that he's got to do some things different, and he will. And I'm not saying hire him. I'm saying talk to him because, I mean, at one point, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I mean, he was right there with Sean Payton and a lot of these guys who everybody looked at as the top head coaches in the league. So I would talk to him because I think Jerry needs somebody who's going to come in and say, here's how we should do things, instead of just conforming to what Jerry wants to do.
Peter, love the time. Always, I could literally talk to you for the full hour, but I've got to do your podcast later, and I look forward to chatting with you for the Peter King podcast later on today.
That'll be great, Rich. Thanks so much for having me.
No, you bet. That's Peter King, NBC Sports Pro Football Hall of Famer in his own right here on The Rich Eisen Show.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download The Rich Eisen Show app.